Shroomahuasca, an ayahuasca and mushroom trip report from 2000, uploaded to Aerowit on April 6, 2001. I was at one point invited into a healing ceremony with a Peruvian ayahuasquero and gladly accepted the offer, having at that point worked with mushrooms quite a bit and wanting to move on to other tryptamine-based entheogens. The ceremony was held over a weekend at a spiritual center outside of Seattle, with participants drinking ayahuasca Friday and Saturday nights. Friday was a good but mild experience. Even though more was offered, I took only 3 ounces of ayahuasca, wanting to test the waters with this new teacher. I did feel the effects for a couple of hours, saw beautiful patterns and such, and eventually fell into a deep dreamless sleep. I awoke the next day feeling a little disappointed. After all, I had heard that ayahuasca is amongst the cream of the crop of entheogens. I spent the day alone in deep meditation, and sometime in the early afternoon I started hearing the voice of my mushroom teacher. This was the first time I heard this voice while not under the influence, so I must say it took me quite by surprise. It told me that I had some fear of a new teacher, and to find what I was looking for I should be introduced by the mushroom. I am not one to argue the logos, so when I packed up my belongings I made sure to include some of my fungal friends. I went to the shaman and explained what had happened to me that day, and told him that I would very much like to try this. His response was simply, "You are the traveler, so if you are up for it, I would like to know myself." I started off slow, 3 ounces of ayahuasca and 2.5 grams of mushrooms. Within half an hour, the logos came and instructed me to take more. I went to the shaman and asked him for another cup, and then ate the remaining mushrooms. Very shortly afterwards, I was kneeling on my mat when I felt the sensation of a wave coming up behind me. As it hit, it literally knocked me into a prone position. I opened my eyes to find that I now was holding a glowing entity in my arms that emanated a feeling of divine love. The spirit and I frolicked for a bit, close to an hour I imagine, in an amazing communion of spirits that I can only relate to the best sex you ever could have, times 10. After our little tryst, the spirit began to teach me, not in a way my mushroom teacher does. I would put out a thought, it would show me how it relates to the universe. I would think about the relationship, etc. I began to have one of the few true stream of consciousness experiences of my life, where the facts behind every thought were instantly there. Then I moved on to the healing. I have a friend who has had an enormous amount of pain inflicted on her psyche over the years. She knew I was doing ayahuasca that weekend and asked me to help her if it came to mind. And I promised I would try, but what she was feeling seemed to me to be an incredible need to cry. To this she explained that she had not cried in nearly 15 years, but when she did, it felt like acid had been poured down her face. During my experience, she popped into my head and I asked the spirit, "What does she need?" The reply came back, "You were right, she needs to cry. She says she can't, it causes her pain. Then you need to focus on taking the pain from her." At this point I had an image of my friend, sitting on her bed, leaning against her nightstand, resting her head on her hand. She had a brilliant smile on her face and was crying. I began to cry myself, and, strange to me then, the tears burned my face, like acid. The next morning I went home to find a message from my friend on my machine saying that something incredible had happened and that I needed to see her right away. I went to her house and she told me that in the middle of the night she awoke from a sound sleep and felt an immense wave of emotion. The wave got stronger and stronger until suddenly she couldn't help but to cry. She cried, and not for an instant did it cause her pain. I sat on her bed and poised myself the way I had seen her in my vision, and she asked in amazement, "How did you know that?" I could only smile. I have since this experience taken ayahuasca somewhere around 40 times, and only twice did I have such strong visions. Both times I had taken mushrooms with the ayahuasca. I'm very curious to know if anyone else has taken this mix and what their results have been.